So like many videographers, I started my career off by filming weddings. And after 8 years of wedding videography, I've learnt a lot. And to be honest, I was going to create a how to film a wedding video, but I realized that I learnt a lot more from my mistakes than I ever did from what I got right. So today I'll be counting down my top 10 mistakes that I made when I started out in wedding videography and what you can do to avoid them. Welcome to Kaicreative and welcome to another filmmaking video. My name is Kai Song and I am a filmmaker, videographer and animator living and working in London. And if you're new here, we do camera review videos, how-to videos and general visual creation type content. So if any of that stuff interests you, then do consider subscribing. Now you've probably heard the saying that you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. And that would definitely be the case for me when it came to wedding videography. I started out filming weddings in 2011, and after my first one, which I filmed for free, for family, I literally got a notepad out and I wrote down all the mistakes I'd made and what I needed to do to correct them for future weddings. And I did that for my first 15 or so weddings. So today I'm breaking down these lists to ensure that you don't have to repeat the same mistakes that I made. So let's get into it. Number 10, using only one camera. When filming my earlier weddings, I did so as a solo shooter with only one camera, my Panasonic HMC 41E. And looking back at that now, it seems kind of insane, especially as you miss out so much when only using one camera, not two or three. And there are several issues that arise here. First of all, you don't have a cutaway safety shot to cover you when you move your main camera or when you zoom in and out. Also, you miss the two angles of the bride and the groom for the vows, as well as reaction shots during the speeches. On top of this, the post-production work also requires you to be a lot more creative. It requires a lot more time because you're trying to get everything from one camera. Nowadays, I film weddings with at least one other person and I will cover the ceremony and speeches with at least 3 cameras. This is the video team today, so myself, we've got Phil and we've got Brock. We used a 3-camera setup for the speeches. Now it might seem more expensive and complicated to do things this way, but it makes your life so much easier when it comes to editing, and it will save you days, if not weeks, of editing time. Number 9, onboard camera sound. Another massive mistake that I made on my very first set of weddings was to use the onboard camera sound for the wedding ceremony and speeches. Sure, I had a microphone mounted on the top of my camera, but of course it sounded terrible. You have that tinny, echoey sound that just isn't usable.
And we realised how much I wanted you.
So don't use onboard camera sound, especially for important sound bites like the vows or the speeches. Make sure you capture good sound with an external recording device. Nowadays I use something like the H1 Zoom mic to capture good sound for the vows and speeches, and I also plug in a H4n Zoom into the DJ desk so that I can also get good sound from any microphones. Number 8, using poor lenses. Something that I learned early on when I started filming weddings was that old hotels, churches and some receptions had terrible lighting. They were always dim and maybe had a horrible yellowish colour of light. And at first I tried mounting a powerful bright light to the top of my camera to compensate for this, but I found it to be quite distracting and in some cases quite blinding to the wedding party and wedding guests. Not good for video content. At this point I decided I needed to have better quality video in low light, and this is what led me to getting DSLRs and packing up my old Panasonic. Even after getting DSLR cameras, I invested in lenses that were cheap and nasty, and the effects of these were clearly seen. It was dark, it was grainy, it was horrible footage. This forced me to invest in better lenses later on with faster f-stop values, meaning that I could use a bigger aperture, which allowed in more light, and also gives you a cleaner picture. Now soon, I also made the jump to full frame cameras, which shoot at higher ISOs with much less grain, and this also helped massively. Number 7, setting the white balance. As already mentioned, those old hotels and churches and their dim yellow lighting can cause real issues for your picture quality later on. And it can also affect the skin tones of people, making them look overly tanned or even slightly ill. So you have to make sure that you set your white balance. Use a white card or a grey card and set your white balance on your camera in each new location that you're filming in. If you fail to do this, like I did when I first started, you will waste days, if not weeks, of your time trying to color correct off-color images, especially of your bride and groom. Number 6, constant movement. One of the things I remember from my very first wedding video was the constant zooming that I did. I would zoom in and then I would zoom out with no time to focus on anything, like literally no time. I was screaming at the screen in post-production because I had recorded constant zooming or handheld camera movement, and it was unwatchable. It was basically unusable. Now, this isn't to say that movement is a bad thing. In fact, controlled, planned, tasteful movement, when done properly, is essential. So use a slider, use a gimbal, use a crane. That kind of movement will add heaps of production value to your finished video. Also, consider investing in a decent tripod. These will be necessary for all the stationary shots at the ceremony and the reception. At the beginning of my video journey, I used a cheap $30 tripod to mount thousands of dollars worth of equipment onto. Don't do that. Invest in something that is solid. Number 5, poor composition. Another error I used to make when filming was literally to hold the camera, point it at the subject and hit record. In those early days, I gave no consideration at all to composition, spacing, rule of thirds, leading space, any of that stuff. I literally just did a point and shoot, which is incredibly boring to watch and even more boring to edit. So make sure that you use the rule of thirds. Do reveal shots, position things in the foreground so you can pull focus, shoot through objects or through doorways, do time lapses, follow the rule of threes, so film in threes to get mini stories. There are so many interesting ways to portray something, so be creative. Also, get the details. And I'm not just talking about table favors and name cards. Although these things are important, you want to make sure you film them. I'm referring to things like the couple holding hands, little looks during the day that the couple might give each other, genuine embraces. If you can capture genuine smiles and looks, then you're definitely going to up that production value and storytelling element to your end video. Number 4, no establishing shots. Continuing on from the storytelling aspect of wedding filmmaking, one of the things that I neglected in the early days was getting establishing shots of the locations that I was filming at. Now, the idea here is to ensure that you have a wide shot of the venue or the location of where you're filming to help tell the story. These establishing shots help the viewer understand where the action is actually taking place, whether that be at a hotel, in a church, or whatever venue you're filming at. If you don't include these shots, it can be a little jolting in the final edits when you change location. Having them in there just makes everything in the story fit more nicely together, and it helps the edit run much more smoother. Number 3, filming without purpose. One of the things that you definitely want to do is film with your edit in mind. Now, one of the mistakes that I initially made when filming weddings for paying clients was that I felt that I always had to be filming something, even after I had all the shots that I wanted. This meant that I came away with tons of footage of the same thing or pointless things, unthought out shots. Now, generally, you do want to film a lot to give yourself options later in the edit, but what I'm talking about here is hours of unthought out B-roll that can be useless later and a waste of your time, energy, and hard drive space. As an example, what I used to do was leave a camera set up somewhere filming a wide shot of the reception when people were dancing or sitting and chatting. And it was hours of pointless footage that no one was ever going to watch. So if you already have everything that you plan to get and still have time, then get creative. Use that time to create something new, something maybe abstract. Again, film in threes, tell those mini stories. Film with your edit in mind. Number 2, photographers. Dealing with photographers can be difficult for videographers, and vice versa. I've heard a fair few horror stories from both sides about either side. But as a videographer, you need to understand that the photographer kind of runs the day creatively, and sometimes they will get in your shot. And sometimes the flashes on their camera will disrupt your video and annoy you. So let's just get that part out of the way first. When I started out as a wedding filmmaker, I had a couple of experiences where the photographers took control of absolutely everything and shadowed the bride and groom completely. In one instance, they shadowed them to such a degree that they ended up in a lot of my footage, and the only shots I got of the couple alone were the staged photos that the photographers had set up. Now, I'm all for having the photographers in as part of the story, but seriously, this wedding had a husband and wife photography team, and it was like they were literally joined to the hips of the bride and groom, so I couldn't get any shots without them being in there, and it did annoy me. So to counter this for future weddings, I put a section in my questionnaire, the one that I send out before the day, like a couple of months before the day, where I asked the couple if they want a 15-minute private video shoot with the video team only. And if they do, I make sure I communicate this to the photographers and let them know beforehand so there isn't any issues. And if the couple getting married say no, they don't want a private video shoot, then I don't view it as a problem. If they want a documentary style video without staged video shots, then at least I don't have to worry about the photographers being in my shots all the time. Number 1, no plan. Before you even touch your camera equipment, the most important thing you need is a plan, a schedule. You need to know who the key people are. And I'm not talking about the bride and groom here. You definitely need to know who the bride and groom are. But I'm talking about the maid of honor, the best man, parents of the bride and groom, photographers, the DJ, the master of ceremonies. These are all people that will be a massive help on the day and can be strong allies in making the day successful. You need a schedule of events. Who is going to be where, doing what, and when. This makes sure you are in the right place filming the important stuff when you need to be. Now, on my first paid wedding job, I had no clue at all who any of these key individuals were, apart from the bride and the groom. And I didn't have the times of when things were happening, and I really struggled. But if I had a point of contact or allies at the event, then they could have helped me sort something out quicker and not look like a headless chicken running around not knowing what was going on. Nowadays, as mentioned before, I send out a questionnaire well in advance for the bride and groom to fill out so that I can have all of those details and contact information of important people, as well as times and schedules. And I sit down a couple of days before the wedding and I look at this information and plan with military precision what, where, who, when, how, and I mentally go through all of that stuff so I have like a physical paper plan, but also this mentally rehearsed plan. And finally on this, you need to know that no matter how much planning you do, things will always go wrong. But if you are prepared and you have a plan, and maybe even a contingency plan, you can make your wedding video filming day successful. So that's my list of mistakes. There are many more, to be honest. But what is the biggest mistake you've ever made out when filming at a wedding? And how did you get around that problem? Let me know down in the comment section below. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found this content valuable. If you did, then share it with someone else who might find it valuable. Remember to stay creative, imagine, implement, and inspire. And I will see you next time on Kaicreative.